What's going on, fellow Eagles? Welcome to the Few. If you listen to the first show of the Few, you listened to me tell a personal story about myself that ended in kind of the rules of the Few. So on the Few, we talk about two things: the rules of the Few, but then also the stories of the Few. And today, I am very grateful, very honored to be sitting across from an OG Eagle. OG, 2019, 2020. That makes you an OG.
I'll take it.
OG Eagle, Teresa, who drove, in city terms, a very long way to visit HQ today. So we decided to sit down and do this episode and talk a little bit about her story. So I'll let you introduce yourself. I spoiled the surprise. Your name's Teresa. What else? You're from clear across the state of Pennsylvania, right?
I am.
Okay.
Several hundred miles for sure.
All right. So the opposite side of Philly. It's beautiful, I would assume, out there.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Not as gritty as what you see here at HQ.
Different kind of beauty. It's got its place. It's got its place.
I appreciate that. As a born and raised Philadelphian, I appreciate your PC answer. I appreciate it. I appreciate it very much. So we've been jamming all day. It's Community Power Hour. Teresa came through for that. We got a lift in. Karen was here. She shot your portrait for Faces of the Few, which is an upcoming project that we're working on. She also shot you lifting, right? So that was cool. We rocked out to some punk, some ska, right?
Naturally.
Okay, yeah.
Now we just need some battle dizzy.
Right. So we're having a great day, and again, we just wanted to sit down. And there's two things about you. Today's obviously the first day we met in person, but we've known each other, I guess, on social media for a few years now. And when you said you were going to come through, I was super excited. But there were two things that I needed to feel from you, right? And the first thing was your energy. On Instagram, your energy is infectious, especially your pre-lift jam. I call it a jam dance. I don't know what you want to call it, but your pre-lift energy is infectious. So that's the first thing that I wanted to feel. Second thing is, from what I see on social, you seem like a very resilient person, in body, but more so in mind, because of how you've pushed yourself to overcome some things, right? Some injuries and things like that in your life. So I wanted to see if I felt those two things from you when I met you, and I absolutely did. You said that you toned down your energy today, right?
I do. If I'm in a new place. Yeah. Absolutely.
I get it. But it was still here, and after you leave, it'll stay here. So I'm very, very grateful for that. So let's. We talked about where you're from. We talked about, you're an OG Eagle. So you said you found us around the community around 2019, 2020.
Yep, I did.
Yeah. On Instagram. Yeah. Was it somebody else, or you just stumbled upon us, or was it an ad? I don't know. Do you remember?
Honestly, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But, so when it comes to kind of businesses that I see on social media, I feel like people are always selling stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not really a stuff person. I think it's, I grew up in, I don't want to say a highly impoverished area, but I mean, we don't have a lot of industry, so there's not a very high per capita where I come from.
Yep.
And so we have a very modest lifestyle.
Sure.
And when I see somebody that's not selling a thing, but they're selling an idea, I resonated so much with your message. I think the one that really sucked me in first is from the moment that I saw that, let me get this one right.
Yep.
Hang on, I'm drawing a blank, so I'm so nervous.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Grab it out.
Is it?
Comfort is a slow death.
Yeah. I know you're.
Comfort is a slow death, prefer pain. And man, if that isn't just kind of embodying everything about me being in the strength world. There's so many times that I have to make that conscious decision between, is what I'm doing courageous? Like, am I being brave right now? Am I being diligent and hardworking? Or am I just being stupid? Like, am I going too far in terms of kind of pushing my body to what it's capable of?
Yeah. I think a lot of us go through that struggle. The prefer pain message that we put out there is the most popular message in our community, or mantra in our community. And I think that's because we all feel that way. You've had what I would consider probably more pain than the average person, right? So early on in your life, you broke your back, right? Which you would never know. You sitting here right now, me lifting with you earlier, the videos of your training on social, like you would never know. And I think that speaks to what I was saying before, like your resiliency mentally, not just physically. So how did that happen, if you don't mind sharing?
No, not at all. So when I was kind of going through my transition from 8th grade into high school, I was not necessarily a gymnast in terms of what people think of with like floor, beams, bar, but I was a gymnast with tumbling, and then I was a competitive cheerleader. Okay. And so it was just kind of a routine that we would do a lot of tumbling passes in our competition training. And because I have a hypermobility syndrome, I was basically just doing a back handspring, and I had a traumatic break. So there are these things called your pars articularis, I believe. They're very small joints in your back. And my understanding is they are the only bones that really connect the vertebrae and the spinal column. So otherwise, the vertebrae are kind of segmented pieces with soft tissue in between. Right. And so when you break that piece, especially if it was in a traumatic injury like I had, it was upon impact, it broke, and my whole spine shifted. So my whole spine sits crooked at my L5S1 by about 30 degrees off from where it should.
Wow. So what's life after that like? Is there a long recovery from that? Like, did you obviously stopped competitions?
I did. Okay. So that was the end of my tumbling career. Okay. I still occasionally, I see a big area like this. I know you guys can't see it, but the space here is beautiful. And I literally walked in. I think one of the first things I said to you is, man, I just had to do like a handstand walk.
And we have mats. We have mats right there.
Exactly. Yeah. So no, I was immediately, discouraged from, at the time I was competing in diving as well. They said I really shouldn't be doing anything that was high impact. So no diving, cheerleading, tumbling. Right. Basically they said never lift more than 50 pounds, take it easy.
I've never seen you lift more than 50 pounds if anybody asks.
Absolutely not.
I've never seen it ever.
Absolutely not.
Ever.
And so, and a spondylolisthesis, that's what it's called. Yeah. It's an interesting condition because there are some people that have it by a degenerative nature. Some people have it congenital, meaning they're born with it. Yeah. And there's actually a segment of the population who has this same sort of injury or deficit or ailment, but they are completely asymptomatic. So a lot of times it comes down to the root cause. So because mine was traumatic, I had an acute flare-up right away, a lot of inflammation. Sure. And so I have a lot of spinal instability because of that. Got
you. So what, obviously you're a strength athlete, right? Competitive power lifter, ranked power lifter, right? When did you make the transition from, okay, I'm out of diving, I'm out of tumbling, there's no more competitive cheerleading, I have a spinal condition, an issue now. When did you make the transition to powerlifting, to strength sports?
Well, the first thing is I didn't listen. When they told me, stop cheerleading, I'm pretty sure I quit competitive cheerleading, so I didn't have to tumble as much, but I still did it. Yeah. I found that with time, once the acute flare-up kind of simmered down a little bit and I took care of that inflammation, I could kind of deal with the day-to-day achiness and that sort of thing. Yep. And so it really wasn't a matter of me getting the strength conditioning until probably college. Okay. For some reason,
you still continued
I always did
on.
Something, right? Yeah. So I was always a runner. I shouldn't say always. In college, I was a runner. I remember doing like 5Ks, 10Ks. I ran my first half marathon in college. Sure. Not very fast. Yeah. My gait was a train wreck. Yeah. But one day I went.
Mine is too. So I don't.
But all the treadmills were full. Yeah. Like, what am I going to do with myself? And so I remember going downstairs to my university's gym and I'm like looking around these dumbbells. I'm like, I don't really know what to do with this stuff, but I just kind of winged it and it was fine. Yeah. I ended up, as time went on, I graduated college, found a gym in my hometown. Yeah. I learned at that point kind of how to squat, bench, and deadlift. And I was training in a predominantly bodybuilding gym. And so one day somebody came up to me and he said, are you going to compete? And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking he's talking about bodybuilding. Yeah, so I had been a teacher at this point for 3 years, taught 7th grade at that time. Yeah. So I'm teaching 13-year-old boys. Yeah. And so when somebody asked me if I was going to compete in bodybuilding, I think it is an admirable as heck goal. Sure. I can't do it teaching 13-year-old boys. Yeah. And so I looked at him and I said, oh, no. And I explained to him exactly that. Yep. And he was kind of taken aback and he said, oh, no, I didn't mean bodybuilding. I meant powerlifting. And I said, oh, what's powerlifting? So then I went and I looked into it and I was like, oh, there's actually this thing. Yeah. And so I think at the time I probably had maybe a 245 pound squat. I think I just pulled 300 pounds on a deadlift for the first time. I was maybe benching my body weight. And here I am, I'm thinking I'm hot shit. And I walk into this local competition. I'm like, I'm going to be the best. Yeah. Got my butt kicked, bombed out.
Yeah. But I mean, even outside of competition, those numbers are great, like extremely respectable. Like, your body weight was what at the time?
118 probably.
Exactly. Yeah. So first meet didn't really go as you expected.
No, it didn't. Actually, as somebody who's a referee in multiple federations now, I did exactly what I tell lifters not to do. If you missed your first lift, do not go up for your second. Get yourself on the board. I went up, bombed out, and that was the end of it.
Yeah.
So I had a great start in my powerlifting career.
Well, you continued on.
I did. And I wouldn't say it so much. Like, I know a lot of people will say my best motivation is telling me that I can't.
Yep.
I don't know that I ever carry that mantra. I just kind of look at something, however distant, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do that thing.
Yeah.
And that's just once I set my mind to it.
I can person, then somebody else has to tell you you can't. You're more of the type that just says, I can, like I can do that. I can do that. I was gonna ask, like, you know, you mentioned like after you broke your back, you still continued cheerleading and things like that. Like, why? I mean, you probably had every excuse to just stop. I mean, everybody was telling you to stop. But
and my own body was telling me to stop.
Sure.
Even now, I frequently will have seemingly unpredictable, uncorrelated to my training. I'll have back muscle spasms to the point that I can't stand up. It's painful to sit. I just feel like I can't win. So my own body was telling me not to, but it brings me joy.
Yeah.
And I feel like once you get to the point that you stop giving and you stop trying, like, you're not living anymore.
I agree.
And I didn't want to give up the thing that brought me joy. And so, you know, I would deal with the pain. I would deal with the frustration. And as soon as I felt better, I'm like, all right, let's go. I'm gonna keep at it.
Yeah. So now I understand why, you know, Prefer Pain resonates with you so much. So you mentioned you're a ref in multiple federations now. You mentioned teaching. So why don't we go there? So you were teaching 13-year-old boys.
I was.
Right? Okay. You did that for a little while, and then like we were speaking earlier, there was a transition there too, right?
Yeah, so I was a teacher for just about 10 years. The first half of my career, I taught middle school math. The second half of my career, I moved down to the elementary to teach 5th grade. I just wanted to teach some of the littles. But early into my career, I had my first student teacher, I think somewhere around my 3rd year.
Yeah.
And I just really enjoyed working with the professional development aspect and being able to guide and mold a teacher. Because it's so interesting when it comes to being, and we talked about this too, like our personalities in front of people. When it comes to being in the classroom, I mean, I don't even have to say anything. Sometimes I feel like my students just know that I'm there. Like, I pack a punch. And I don't, whether it's good or bad, I don't know, but they knew that I was there.
We were very similar in that.
But at the same time, it's just a part of who I've always been. I never had to learn that. So when I had a student teacher and I kind of learned to coach that up, I thought, oh, you know, I really enjoy getting to work with somebody and seeing them blossom and grow. And the other side of that coin is that I was a math teacher, and I never intended to be a math teacher.
I mean, naturally, you must be very good at math. You must be very good at
No, actually. So because I never intended to be a math teacher. I had some dual enrollment credits when I was in high school. And so when I went into college, to be a dual cert in math and science, I think I only had to take maybe 3 extra math classes to add on my math certification. And so at the time, getting a teaching job in our state was incredibly difficult. And so I truly just did it for marketability. Then my field placements were in math. My student teaching was in math. I was offered my first position, and what was it?
Math.
Yeah.
But you know what? Maybe if all of that didn't happen, you would have never had the student teacher, and you would have never realized the professional development love that you have, and you would have never...
and that's it. And, you know, not to bore you on like the instructional side of it, but I'm as passionate as I am about lifting. Kind of that intellectual side of my brain is so fascinated by the ways that we learn math and the discrepancies between how research shows that we learn versus what we're actually doing in the classroom. And so I was never a confident math student. I was a good memorizer sometimes. But when I got into the math classroom as a teacher, I often felt like, at least at the start, I was only a step ahead of my students. You know, I knew the steps, I knew the rules, and all I had to do was convey that to them. But math is actually so much deeper than that. So when I had students that were these really rich reasoners and they loved problem solving, I had this moment where, I kid you not, I was like, there's a 13-year-old boy in my class who is better at math than I am. This is a problem. And that's when I went back.
That's like every day for me. I'm like, this is math stuff. This is not for me.
So that was when I got my master's in it. And I actually specifically got my master's degree in curriculum and instruction, mathematics, coaching, and supervision. And I said, someday I'm going to get this one job in this region where I'm working as a math consultant and math specialist. I'm getting that one job. There's one person who does it.
Yeah.
And last year I saw the posting for it, I think about a week before it closed. I almost missed it. And I said, well,
I didn't know that part.
Yeah, it was a week before. And I said, it's fine. I was like, I'm getting that job. Yeah. And so I just knew I would do what it took. And I applied for the position. And now I've been working in school improvement and school support for the last year.
Very nice. Very nice. So when you're talking about mathematics and the memorizing versus the actual, like, I guess, reasoning and application or critical thinking, I would imagine that we don't have to go too deep into what you saw in the classroom, but like I would imagine that in the education system, you do see that often, that it's more of a like, let's memorize these rules or memorize these facts, and the person that excels is the person that can best like regurgitate or apply
get the answer. Is our focus so often.
But there's, at least it's my belief, is like, you know, we've shifted away from teaching children how to actually think and reason, and not just for themselves, but just like generally, you know, like why, you know, why are we here? Why are we doing this? Why is it the solution? Instead of just like a, you know, plus blah, 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 you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, 100%.
It makes perfect sense to me when you say like, hey, look, like I encountered kids, but I assume that was rare, that were like really rich reasoners, because the majority of them are memorized.
And, you know, the kids that were so good at thinking, those were the students that were almost half tuning out if I was modeling a problem. They were the ones working ahead and thinking through the problem. Yeah. And that became a massive shift in my instructional pedagogy and how to get kids to think and reason. Because at the end of the day, I don't want my kids to know what to think. I want them to know how to think.
Exactly.
You know, that's such a common saying, but it becomes increasingly true. I mean, if you look at the problems that you face as an entrepreneur, there's so much. There's no textbook telling you what to do. No. You can't go back and say, oh, well, what did the answer say in this book? You have to figure it out as you go. It's strategic planning.
Yep. There's no rule book. You know, there's no answer key. You know, what it comes down to is resourcefulness and creativity. And when you're put in a, you know, this is a little bit extreme, but when you're put in like a mill, that the object of the mill is that you memorize and you like regurgitate, you lose those faculties of being resourceful and creative and all that. So it does not surprise me in the least bit that those reasoners were also the ones that were like, this memorization stuff is like boring. Like, I'm just going to like tune this out and I'm going to actually think and reason through this problem, you know? So what's awesome is you're like, you realize that, you came to that epiphany, and then you now taken that knowledge and you're using it to mold or construct curriculum, right? To fix problems in the state and other schools. And like, that's what we need. We don't need tenured memorizers.
That's
you know what I mean?
I always say, and I don't know where I got this from. It was probably a podcast or a speaker somewhere along the line. But it's in math in particular, I don't want my kids to be slow, buggy versions of Microsoft Excel, right? Like, they don't have to be able to get the answer. I want them to know when they put the answer into the formula and it comes out in their computer, is it right? Is it sensible? Is it reasonable for the context of what we're working in? Did they know the problem that they needed to solve in the first place to actually accomplish the goal they're working for?
Sure. I was always you mentioned you're a pretty good memorizer, so was I. I got bored of memorizing. And that's what like really like, I got to a point where I was pretty good at it. Like mentally, my recollection visually is very good, but I got bored of it. And that's what like drove me into technology, because the problems were more complex and I had to think harder. Like, I couldn't memorize how to write a piece of software. You know what I mean? So,
which, for a person who says that he's not a math person, did I just give away too much there?
So no. So I'm not a math guy.
We're going to talk about that phrase in a second, but go ahead.
So
but you did computer science. Computer science is math.
So I guess it's really the application of it.
Yeah.
Like, calculus, I almost failed calculus in college, but I finished my bachelor's in 3 years. I finished my bachelor's a year early because I was out coding everybody. Like, my senior year, my chair for computer science was like, don't even come back. Like, we're going to test you out of your classes. Go start your career. And that's what I did. But like, I almost failed calculus 2 years before as a freshman, you know? So I think it was more so the application of it. I can think in very abstract terms when it comes to computer software and like objects, but numbers, like thinking in abstract terms with numbers, just never clicked for me. I don't know.
That's so interesting, because math really is so much more than just numbers. I mean, at its root, math is kind of noticing patterning and reasoning.
So that's exactly,
it's visual spatial.
That's exactly what made me good at programming.
The format that we're presenting it in is numerical. But it's still, I mean, especially as you grow, you know, we start off strictly numerical whenever kids are learning to count and reason additively and multiplicatively.
Sure.
But once we get into functional reasoning, there's so many representations of it.
Yep.
And even on the numerical side, it's very multifaceted in terms of visual representation.
So that explains it probably. So maybe I am a math guy.
You are.
It's just the numerical representation of math isn't my thing.
No, but it can be.
It can be. It absolutely can be. And also, I don't think I had many great teachers, and I'm very grateful for. But I don't think I had somebody like you coming up. You know what I mean? Or a curriculum like you would put together coming up. I think that numerical representation of mathematics just like escaped me. Plus, I'm like a builder of things. And building numerical problems and solving them just like wasn't my thing, but like seeing a real world problem of somebody saying like, I have 100 spreadsheets with all this data in it and I need to crunch them all and it's going to take me like 100 years. And I'm like, I can write a piece of software for that. You know, I can build something that will get that done for you in 10 minutes. That just made more sense to me.
So then when is there going to be a Fuel Hunt app for programming that we can use to kind of, you know, oh my goodness, what am I trying to say? Track all of our reps and our sets and be able to see our progress over time, communicate with our coaches.
Yeah. So you can use Daily Attack Plan for some of that. I built the first version of Daily Attack Plan, right?
But like we want the whole communication piece.
We want the whole thing, thing. Don't tempt me. Like I will get distracted by some shiny objects and I'll just start like coding right after this thing. No, those days, who knows? I never say that they're behind me. But for now, I've put them on the back.
I appreciate that because from the aspect of a daily attack plan, your whole premise is recognizing that being able to be driven and to be hardworking goes so much beyond physical training, right? You know, it's all of the things that embody who we are and what we do in our respective professions. And so it's more about that conscious awareness of our day-to-day isms, more so than just working out. Not to say just working out, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's one component of it. I mean, like, you know, Daily Attack Plan, the secret ingredient of Daily Attack Plan is intention. You know, it's, of course, the planning is important, you know what I mean? And knowing where you're going to expend your energy for the day. But it's the intention that starts all that. You sitting down and saying, like, look, I am a human with a finite energy reserve. I have these goals. You know, I have these people that I love, these people that I want to serve. And this is how I'm going to expend my energy and manage my energy during the day and making a plan. It's that intention. It's like the secret sauce of Daily Attack Plan. So
and it's so important because you think about, I think it was, have you heard of Angela Duckworth's book, Grit?
Yes.
So that idea that some of us were able to go through a certain adversity, but within the appropriate parameters that we have the support to go through it and triumph. You know, there is that biological and also early environmental effect, and how some people just kind of naturally have that and don't necessarily need the scripted support, so to speak. But then largely, I feel like so many people need that to kind of check their own boxes.
Yeah, I agree, especially as time goes on. You know, society's changing. The fabric of society is changing a bit. Our attention spans are changing, so it's becoming more important, I think, to have that as we change, and that's one of the reasons for the community too. You know, so I believe that when you have the energy of, you know, 100,000 people doing that together and living that way and thinking that way, that you can really have a positive change on the world. You know what I mean? Like that energy is infectious. So yeah, that's another reason behind why we started the community. So
I dig it.
What else have we not covered? We covered strength. We covered teaching. How about so your preferred hard work is probably, I would say, powerlifting, right? Like if you're going to do something, okay.
And that's in terms of getting back to it. I've kind of dabbled in some other things. I'm like, well, maybe I could kind of put half effort into Olympic lifting because I really can't do a lot of extension. I thought maybe I could just do like a little competition and qualify for the Open or something.
Sure.
And I'm like, yeah, maybe, no, probably not. And anytime I try to go away from powerlifting, like there's this part of my heart that watches somebody lifting heavy in the gym, and I'm like,
listen,
see you.
Powerlifting. So I told you I powerlifted for a little while. I was strong kid, but I was never terribly competitive at it. But I loved it. I think it's like the perfect metaphor for life. Now I'm like a jiu-jitsu guy, so I think that's a great metaphor too. But it all started with powerlifting, like the pressing and pulling of an obstacle, no matter the weight, to always like move forward, to always keep moving. It's like the perfect metaphor for life. So I understand your love for it.
And also just that being present in that one moment. I mean, think about how in the day-to-day, so many people just kind of get lost like in the grind, so to speak, and they're not self-aware of the process they're actually going through. But I mean, to this day, I can hear it, I can see it, I can feel the moment. I hear the song that was playing for my opening squat when I competed in the Arnold Pro Raw a few years ago, and I could just hear that roar of the crowd and the flash of the lights. And I can get under the bar visually, and I will see that moment for the rest of my life. I was so present and so there. And every lift is like that, like, especially now. Whenever I was deadlifting earlier and I walked up for one of those deadlifts, I just had this moment where before I even grabbed the bar, I just smile because I'm so grateful for that moment. Like every lift that I get it's a gift. I couldn't do it for so long, and just to have that within my grasp.
Even when you were at Arnold, I think I remember watching a highlight of you saying like weeks before that, like you couldn't even move the bar.
I couldn't.
So what happened? What happened there? Was it a flare up or?
It was, and it's one of those things where it's just sort of like an overuse. At the time, my programming was very different. My current coach is very responsive to kind of how my body is reacting. At the time, I was working with very high percentages of my 1RM. Probably squatting twice a week, deadlifting twice a week. It was very tough on my body. And so sometimes it felt spontaneous, but I was just in a fit of muscle spasms. I had a really terrible flexion intolerance. I couldn't tie my shoe.
Really?
Yeah. And so I walked into that competition, no peak. I hadn't really lifted for about 3 weeks.
So you basically just before that competition, you pulled back, and then you just said, okay, I'm going to ride it out for the next couple of weeks, and then just go in and get it done.
That's it.
I think that speaks to your mental strength. You know what I mean? I really do.
It's funny though. One of the things that I never let go of is that I still remember walking backstage, and I had this knee kind of wrapped up in a Rogue, like the stretchy Rogue bands you then take off for decompression, and I had it wrapped up for squat. No, I had it wrapped up for bench. And the technical controller came up to me and he said, you're not allowed to have that on. I said, I know. And I look back at all of my pictures and videos and how I always had this knee wrapped, and I didn't realize this wicked tear that I had in my knee that, I competed at the Arnold. I took a little bit of time off. I dropped weight classes. I was competing as a 57. Now there is no 57 class anymore, but I was a 57. I cut down to a 52. I did 2 competitions as a 52, and I had my sights set on the national record deadlift. So in the 52 weight class, it was 420 pounds for the drug tested record. And I'm like, I want this. My coach, I still remember the day my coach said, I was doing like a growing 5 scheme. And he said, Teresa, you pulled 385 for 5. You can try 400. I was like, all right, I'm ready. And no, it was 385 for 6. I was 385 for 6. And I got the 5th rep, and I totally gassed out. And so I never got the full 400. And then I think it was 2 weeks later, my knee, it was called a bucket handle meniscus tear. It folded into my knee joint and got stuck. And it was just like, I was done. I was climbing this ladder of my goals and chasing it with everything that I had. And then I couldn't walk. I had knee surgery. I was immobilized for 2 months straight. Like, I mean, I had one of those gnarly. I don't know if you remember that thing. I cringe when I see somebody in one of those braces. I feel their pain.
But you've continued. Like you've continued, you haven't stopped, and you still get joy from it.
Oh my gosh, yes. Honestly, I would argue that I probably get more joy from it now because, that saying, you don't realize what you have until it's gone.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's almost shameful to say, but I mean, I would break down in tears so frequently. I mean, even now, I have my home gym. I can't. The reason I don't train there anymore is because I can't. I look at my swords and my trophies and my badges, and I hurt. But now I've gotten to the point where I couldn't do it. And the fact that I'm like on a random day where my back was fussy for the last week, I'm like, let's hook grip and do some reps in the 300. And it's no big deal. And that is amazing to me. I appreciate it so much more.
I feel the gratitude, and it comes through in your, what I call your pre-dance, pre-lift jam that you do. Like you, and as I opened, like the energy that you have in that moment is authentic. It's infectious. It says so much about you. So when you say, I get joy from it, I see that. And I think everybody else does too. And it's an inspiration because you could very, very, very much say just, you know what, I did these things, they were great, now I'm injured, and I'm just gonna hang it up. But you don't.
Yeah.
You don't.
You know, somebody who followed me on social media for a while, I think I met him at a competition. He looked at me, he's like, you really like that in person. Well, yeah, really. Like, what did you think? But you know, it's so interesting. I think it was one of the books I was reading, and I kind of paralleled it to one of. Do you listen to the Huberman podcast?
I know of it, but I don't listen to it yet.
Absolutely love it. Some of them are very meaty. I mean, talk about content. But the book that I had read, it talks about happiness and how happiness is sort of like an equation. We were joking about math equations earlier, and it says that 50% of your happiness is just sort of your baseline. It's who you are. It's your early environmental influence.
You're vibrating high or low.
Yeah.
It's like kind of your baseline. Yeah.
Only 10% of your happiness is circumstantial. So it's whatever you're going through in that moment. The remaining 40% is how you intentionally respond to your circumstance. And whenever I was reading about that, they presented a couple of case studies which shared two subgroups, one of which had recently suffered a highly traumatic incident. I want to say they were things like paralysis, you know, death and dismemberment of a family member, some really difficult things that undoubtedly are going to tank your happiness. The other subgroup were persons who had just gone through incredibly joyous occasions. I want to say like lottery winnings was actually one of the highest cited, because now they've got all this money, that I can only imagine. And they were obviously incredibly happy. But it was only that 10% range, and then the sequential, or not, the succeeding 40% that paired with that. And after about 6 months, this group, which was so low, and this group, which is so high, leveled back out.
They returned to baseline.
Because at the end of the day, 50% is who you are. And I won't lie. Clearly, I have a very high base level of dopamine. It's just who I am. But that 40% is just what you do with it.
Yes, exactly. And I think you said it. It's how you respond to what you're presented with in your world and your worldview. And I think that there's a serious distinction to be made between reaction and response. And it goes back to the intention. Like if you have that intention dialed in, you're going to respond to what's happening around you in a meaningful way that keeps you above baseline. The reaction, you know, not being able to regulate yourself emotionally, not seeing the forest through the trees, that's the problem. You know what I mean? But it's that in that response.
Yeah.
For sure.
And it just comes down to purpose and self-awareness.
Yep. Absolutely. So I want to wrap this up. I will say that the expectations that I had today in meeting you, infectious energy and I'm going to say also infectious resilience were met, were exceeded. So I'm very grateful that you came through HQ today. I know it was a bit of a drive. You are welcome anytime. We'll put on punk. We'll deadlift anytime.
Let's go.
Anytime you are in the area. And I know for a fact that the entire community, is going to really enjoy getting to know your story at a deeper level. So
thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Means a lot.
Thank you.
Worth the drive. Definitely worth the drive.
Thank you. All right, gang. I want you to remember something. It's going to sound familiar, but I like to remind you, no one owns you. No one owes you. You have the freedom to work hard to design your life. Make it a life that is in service to others. Talk soon.